Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our Town Council meeting this October 12th, 2021. I'm going to do a roll call for attendance. Albert Yance. Here. David Harwood.
Here.
Sue Sweeting.
Here.
And Doug Matheson.
Here.
Okay, if you would, let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to thank everyone for attending this evening. It's been kind of a strange fall. We haven't had any frost or snow. Gosh, maybe I shouldn't have said that, but
Plenty of acres.
a lot of acorns. Acorns or acorns?
Acorns.
Acorns, okay. All right, just one clarification for the record. All right, moving right along, approval of minutes, September 7th, 2021. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, Albert? David?
Aye.
Sue?
Aye.
Doug?
Aye.
Approval of minutes, September 14th, 2021. Motion?
I make a motion to approve with the following addition. On page 9, when we were discussing the information on removal of restrictions based on data, I would like to add that Jennifer Green, the Watauga County Health Director, said that removal will depend on hospitalization numbers, levels of transmission and infection rate, and that there's no way to predict until we see the data.
Got that, Hillary?
I have it
Okay.
written down.
All
I'll
right.
give it to you.
We have a motion with changes. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, Albert? David?
Yes.
Sue?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
All right. Do we have a motion to approve the regular agenda?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, Albert? David?
Yes.
Sue?
Yes.
Doug?
Aye.
All right. Consent agenda. Budget amendment 2021-11. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion that we can't discuss? All right, Albert? David?
Yes.
Sue?
Yes.
Doug?
Aye.
Okay. All right, now we're at the public comment section. If you would, please keep it down to 3 minutes if it's all possible. That way that maybe we can get out this evening and be able to watch the app game by 12 or 1 o'clock in the morning. So, moving right along, Ms. Eagles. Ms. Eagles, would you state your name, full name, and address for the record?
Even Light Eagles, 612 Ransom Street. So this deals with COVID. So riding in the car when I was little, me and my sister, we would always complain because our parents were smokers and we would fuss. And we would want them to roll down the windows and they wouldn't do it, and then we would pitch a fit and then they would. And so now if I mention this to my mom, when it comes up, she cringes because parents make mistakes, and so do government agencies like the CDC and the FDA. But one thing is it's different when parents make a mistake in their family policy based on a lack of information or misinformation. It's a very different thing when a government agency makes public policy based on a lack of information or misinformation. And so there, whether you hear it in the news or in social media, in the hospital, or from doctors or not, there's massive debate about the safety and efficacy of masks and the COVID injections. And there's fights both for and against, and there's a reason for the Constitution. It is unethical for me or any government to force you to do something against your own medical will, and it's against, it's the same for you or the government to force me. So I don't know which way I said that, but I think you got my point. So there's a reason that you're forbade in the Constitution to make laws that infringe upon my or anybody else's rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And so anybody who wears a mask, or at this point, anybody can get they can wear a mask or they can get a vaccination at any point. There's nothing stopping anybody from doing that. So the mandates by default are aimed at forcing people who would not otherwise take that advice. So it is by default unconstitutional. So to me, it's not a question of whether or not if it's unconstitutional, but why you think that it's okay to override the Constitution in order to stop people, to stop people having that right. So, and again, as I prefaced before, I totally believe all of you are doing what you believe is best, but I believe this is a very important point. So the mandates have been passed pursuant to 166A, the North Carolina General Statute 166A, and the declared state of emergency. So I would like to formally petition the town council to provide specific justification for your declaration of the state of emergency. And I understand you rely heavily upon the CDC's guidance, and I understand you rely upon Jennifer Green at Regional Healthcare. But what I'm asking is for you to specifically explain your specific justifications at this point in time for that state of emergency. And then also, which, and when it started, just what are your specific reasons for having started it and continuing with that? And then number two is I want the exact wording, I just have a second, exact wording within the document of 166A that you believe gives you the right to, even in a state of emergency, to force someone to comply with medical advice with which they do not agree.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms.
And-
Siegel.
Yes, and this right here there's one for each of you. I'll give it to Shane. Well, I forgot to get one for you. Okay. Well, we're in Virginia, there's one for everybody. But you had a doctor last month say that Guillain-Barré syndrome was not one of the side effects. 2 days before she said that, another one of the manufacturers was pushed by or forced by a government agency to put that on.
Thank you, Ms. Siegel. Thank you.
That's the
Can I
information.
ask a
Thank you.
clarifying question?
Yes.
Ms. Eagles, when you say you, are you referring to it the collective or individually?
Both,
Okay, thank you.
yes.
Thank you, Ms. Siegel. All right. Lori Mulhern, I believe. How are you, Lori? I think Lori is spearheading along with many others on a petition that she would like to read. Thank you, Lori.
Jump on that.
If you would, full name and address.
Lori Mulhern, 9239 Valley Boulevard, Blowing Rock. I'm not actually going to read the petition. I can't do that in less than 3 minutes. 4 minutes and 9 seconds was as short as I got it. So I just have a little statement. Good evening, Mayor, Council, and Manager Fox. Respectfully, I'm here tonight to present to you a petition which now has 298 signatures seeking additional action regarding the noise and speeding along Highway 321 through Blowing Rock. So if I might ask right now that this be entered into the minutes if this is an appropriate time.
Would you like to hit highlights of the petition,
I would
Lori?
appreciate it. Well, if there's time when I finish, finish this, I think it's, thank you, Charlie.
All right.
There's been some mention of the word respect in recent communications and in some media, so I would like to state unequivocally that the writers of this petition, that among the writers, there is no lack of respect for town employees and staff. In fact, the very first sentence of the petition states that the undersigned respectfully request, and we do so, request action in that spirit. Much has also been discussed lately of unity as well. But respect and unity cannot be a one-way street. This petition at its core is a compilation of suggested action that individuals have been offering to town government for years. We were struck that the Bingham's letter to council of August of 2020, which the writers were not aware of prior to the drafting of the petition, outlined many of the same points as suggestions as the petition that we wrote does, in fact, many more. However, Laura Bingham made a key point in a recent local press interview that when the town publishes its list of major issues to be addressed in the following year, in the upcoming year, the issue of noise, speeding, and associated safety on Highway 321 never seems to make the cut, and a recent communication would seem to bear that out. I personally have said many times over the years to both members of town government privately and to the council publicly that my worst nightmare is a 4-year-old playing with a ball with their grandparents while they're unpacking the car for a weekend getaway in front of the Green Park Inn, and the grandchild rolling a ball onto 321, running after it, and a speeding car or truck not being able to stop in time. The residents, taxpayers, business owners who have signed this petition have united behind it in the hope that some additional, different action might be taken in order to address this matter. And we hope the Blowing Rock town government will unite with us in this cause. Many stand ready to assist in any possible way. Just ask. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori, and thank all those that were involved with the petition. I think it's very important that, people do get involved, and people have a lot of good ideas. And so that being said, later on, our police chief will address some of these issues moving forward tonight. Okay? Thank you, Lori. Have you got the petition?
I'll give Hillary.
Hillary, Shane's going to have you enter that in the minutes so for future reference, okay? The petition and the explanation, okay? All right. Linda Lassiter, thank you. So long till April.
Well, my name is Linda Lassiter, and my husband and I live at 559 Morningside Drive, Blowing Rock. We're permanent residents of Daytona Beach, and we like to refer to ourselves as sand fleas because when the sand gets hot, we flee. And we come to Blowing Rock. All I want to say is that I appreciate so much all that you do and the hard work that you put in. It's just unbelievable. I can't imagine being in any of your positions. And thank you so, so much. And I just want to say that I love Blowing Rock.
Well, thank you, Linda. Honestly, I think we all love Blowing Rock, and we want the best for Blowing Rock. So, thank you, Ms. Lassiter. Okay, moving right along. Police traffic enforcement update. Is Chief Aaron Miller here?
Yes, sir.
Good evening, Chief.
Good evening. Okay. Mayor, Council. I was asked to give a little brief update on traffic and speeding on Valley Boulevard, so I wanted to do that tonight. I've got just 8 or 9 slides, so it won't be very long. But the first slide here deals with what I believe is the philosophy of our police department in Blowing Rock, how we choose to use our manpower, what our core functions are at the police department. So I thought it would be helpful to talk about that for just a moment. I'd like to talk about this topic at length at some point, maybe at the retreat. But for tonight, you can see in the dark red, this is our committed time. This is the time that we don't get to choose how we spend it. If we get a call for service, we have to go. We have to do training. It's mandated by the state. We have to investigate crimes. And then we also have to deal with special events and other things that arise. So in Blowing Rock, these are kind of we broke it down into 4 core functions for our committed time, right? Time that we don't control. In the other blocks, those are the things that we do with our uncommitted time. And in Blowing Rock, I believe we have 4 primary areas of focus. We have our residential areas that we have to focus on. We have our business areas. Our community policing has to do with some of the efforts that we make toward making our tourists feel safe and welcome here in Blowing Rock, as well as programs and other things. And of course, traffic safety and enforcement is one of those things. So those 4 things are where we spend our uncommitted time. So when we're not on a call, we're not following up on a criminal investigation or some of those things, this is where officers spend their uncommitted time. So I thought it was important to show that first. This is our staffing levels. We have 13 full-time people. I think a lot of people in town think that we're a 100-man police department. We are not. We have 13. 10 of those are assigned to road patrol. Currently, 7 of those road patrol officers are certified to operate a radar. So that's not very many. And 2 of those 7 are supervisors as well. Here's the traffic numbers. This data came from the DOT website. You can read those numbers. 11,000 cars on Valley Boulevard near Ransom Street. So that's a daily average, and that information is from 2019 from the DOT. And I think we would probably all agree that those numbers have probably gone up based on the numbers we hear from the TDA and some other things. So 11,000 cars per day average on Valley Boulevard, that's 2,816,000 cars a year traveling on Valley Boulevard between Main Street and Main Street. Of course, there's a few more cars on the end because we know a number of those vehicles turn onto Main Street and come through town and go out 221. So that's between the 2 Main Street entrances. That's the kind of traffic volume that we're talking about on 321. So when we're talking about speeding and traffic noise, 2,816,000 cars is going to make some noise. Right here is this is sort of a hard number to come up with. So we have, and we'll get into that in a second, but we sort of estimate, and it's a loose estimate, that probably 20% of the traffic is exceeding 35 miles per hour on Valley Boulevard. We know that from the data that we collect. So if that is correct, then there's 2,200 cars a day that are on Valley Boulevard that are exceeding 35 miles per hour. So when did you have that information? Here's what we've been doing about traffic. This year so far, we've stopped 1,893 cars. That's a huge number for a department that has 7 officers that are certified to run radar. That's a huge number. I don't have comparative numbers today because I was only asked about this last week, and we've reached out, but we did not get the other information from other departments back in time for tonight. But trust me, that's a big number. We're on track to hit about the same number that we hit last year with our staffing levels. We hope for more, but to get more, that would depend on being full staffed with all radar certified officers for a 12-month period. That's the only way we get that number up. And of course, we rarely go through a 12-month period that we're full staffed. So that's a problem. As a matter of fact, just to give you a little background, this week one of our newer officers was supposed to be in radar training, which is very difficult to get. We're competing for seats with officers from all over the state of North Carolina. He was supposed to be in radar training this week. On Monday morning, as he was about to leave, he got a call that the radar class had been canceled due to a paperwork glitch at the community college. So I don't know when we'll get that officer back in radar training. It may be months, I'm not sure. The other thing we've been working on is installing 2 permanent mount radar signs. That's been in the works for quite a while. We applied for a grant through Governor's Highway Safety. That grant was approved. We have those signs in-house. The sign posts have been ordered. We have met with Blue Ridge Electric, and I've been working with Matt Blackburn and his department, Public Works Department, to try to get that underway. As soon as we can get that worked into the Blue Ridge Electric schedule, we hope to go ahead and get those signs permanently mounted, one on each end of Valley Boulevard. Hopefully that'll help remind some of the motorists that it's a 35-mile-an-hour speed limit in Blowing Rock. So I talked about getting traffic speed information. So some of you may have seen this report. So we have a radar sign that we can collect data. As a car passes that radar, It logs every car that passes, and they're steep, and I can print out a variety of different reports. I chose this report because it just happened to be the most recent one that I could pull off the computer. But as you can see, this breaks it down into different categories, and every police department that I've ever worked for that I'm familiar with probably uses some type of similar report and data to make decisions about how to focus their resources. So you've got the cars that were traveling, and all these numbers on here are daily averages for that time period, okay, daily averages. So in the first column, in the green column, you've got the cars that were actually going under 35 miles per hour. Is there any way to scroll that down to the very bottom? It's sort of hard to read, and I apologize for that. The yellow is the number of cars that are in the low-risk threshold. Low risk is typically between 35 miles per hour and 45 miles per hour. That's what we would consider low risk. Then you've got medium risk in orange, which would be cars traveling between 45 miles per hour and 55 miles per hour. And then you have a high risk, which is cars over 55 miles per hour. This particular report, let me just give a little explanation. This is just a snapshot in time. So that radar sign is battery operated. We can only leave it out for a certain period. The higher the traffic volume, the quicker the battery goes down. So this is not every day. It may not be every day. It may not be an average of the whole year, but it's a snapshot in time. So this particular period, there were zero. This was near the furniture store on Valley Boulevard. It's where the radar sign collected this data. And it was pointing southbound. So this will be traffic that's traveling up the hill toward the furniture. There were no high risk. And I think that's great that we don't have any vehicles in the high risk category. Some reports do. This is just a snapshot in time. We only had an average of one vehicle per hour. I think if you scroll through, there's one vehicle per hour average. It's in the medium risk. So an average of one vehicle per hour was traveling from 45 miles per hour to 55 miles per hour. You have the yellow, the low risk. I lost it, so I don't know how many are up there, but you have some vehicles in the low risk category there, 51 average per hour. This yellow category, the low risk, is never going to completely go away. Never. It really doesn't matter much what we do. You're always going to have some cars that may be going 36, 37, 38 miles per hour. Some of those cars may have been going 39 miles per hour, but those are in the low risk threshold, and we're never going to eliminate the low risk threshold completely. So as the police chief, if I'm going to send my resources out and try to target what we're going to work on, we definitely want to make sure we don't have any high risk, which on this report we don't. Next thing we want to do is try to target the medium risk. So if I've got a police officer sitting out on the median running radar, we're probably not going to want to spend our precious resources stopping a car that's going 37 miles per hour that's in the low risk category. We're probably going to want to try to target that vehicle that's going 45 to 55 miles per hour in that medium risk category. So that's how we get the data. This is what we do with the data. This is why our officers choose to stop the cars that they choose to stop. So I felt like that was important that you understand that. This is just another way to report the same identical information in a graph. The thing that was of interest to me, and I really hadn't even noticed this until I was preparing this for tonight, there's almost no red. There's almost no red in the high-risk category, and I think that was pretty good. On this particular report, there's almost no medium risk on the graph. Very, very little on medium risk. The last slide I had up here, I want to talk about traffic crashes for a second. On Valley Boulevard, and so far this year, in 2022, there's been 28 total traffic crashes. I even broke that down in a percentage just because I thought it was interesting. If you want to see the percentage of cars that are involved in accidents that travel through our town, that's it. 0.00000099%. So I would think that Valley Boulevard is a fairly safe highway to travel on. We had 5 crashes at the Speedway. The reason I broke that out is we know we have a high crash area at the Speedway. That's something we're trying to work with DOT on. We have a lot of vehicles trying to make left turns and trying to pull out of the Speedway. So I sort of wanted to break that out and separate it. 7 traffic accidents on Valley Boulevard. Speed was indicated as a factor in that accident. Only 7. There were only 3 persons transported to the hospital with injuries, and there were 0 life-threatening injuries or fatalities. So that's our traffic crash data. That's important when we start talking about traffic safety and traffic calming measures. You know, the traffic engineers are going to want to see the data. And this is the data that I've just presented to you. So that's all that I had to present, and I'll field any questions that you might have.
Thank you for that information. That's a well put
Thank you.
presentation. I know that the staff you have is not enough to be out there. What other ways can we deal with not only speeding but noise?
So I'll talk about traffic safety first. We are working on a proposal to present to council, which would be a cost-sharing partnership with Governor's Highway Safety for additional manpower just to work on traffic safety on Valley Boulevard. So that's in the works. I hope to have that ready to present. I was hoping to talk about that at the retreat in January. Because of the deadlines, we may have to bring it up a little sooner, but hopefully we'll have that to you really soon to deliberate and look at. So that's one thing we're working on, is just some additional resources to work on traffic safety. The noise issue is much, much tougher. I don't think that the noise issue is going to be solved by law enforcement intervention. But one thing we did do, we've reached out to the North Carolina Highway Patrol has a division that just concentrates on commercial vehicles, motor carrier enforcement. I reached out to one of the motor carrier enforcement agents here in Watauga County, and I asked a few questions, and I also talked with a supervisor that's over this district with the motor fleet, with motor carrier enforcement. And a few of the questions I asked were, how do you regulate truck noise? The answer from the North Carolina Highway Patrol was, we don't. They explained to me the process. They says it's almost impossible. They don't have the equipment to do it. They've only done it, this supervisor told me he only knew of one time it was done, and they lost that case. So his answer to me was, we don't. We also talked a little bit about trucks traveling up and down 321 beyond the town limits. They do some enforcement in that area. Both of them told me that was a very difficult place to do truck enforcement because there's no place safely for trucks to stop. And it's very difficult for them to stop on the hill. So typically they said more often they would follow the truck into Blowing Rock and maybe stop it at the Outback parking lot or something like that where it's safe to do so. So one question I asked the supervisor, I said, what I'm trying to find out, is there something that we're not doing as far as truck noise on Valley Boulevard that we could be doing? And his answer to me was no. And that's from the North Carolina Highway Patrol. So I don't think that the noise issue is something that we're going to be able, from a law enforcement perspective, to eliminate. When we have 2,800,000 cars a year traveling Valley Boulevard, that's going to generate traffic noise. So that's where we're at with the noise enforcement. The other issue that we're looking at within our department, and Representative Pickett's here, he may have heard some about this. The governor don't mean to put you on the spot, the governor established a commission to look at law enforcement in the state of North Carolina. That commission made a report. One of the things on that report was looking at police agencies de-emphasizing regulatory stops. Specifically mentioned on that de-emphasizing regulatory stops was vehicle noise. So the Governor's Own Crime Commission is recommending that law enforcement agencies not stop cars for vehicle noise. Now, we haven't adopted a policy like that, and I don't think we will. But just to give you an idea, in the law enforcement community, that's some of the things that are being talked about and some of the things that are going around, so.
What about motorcycles?
What about?
Do we have any signs that say motorcycles can't have adjusted mufflers?
I don't think we have any signs that deal with motorcycles, no.
I know we have a noise ordinance that talks about motorcycles, but would that be something that you would recommend to help the motorcycle noise?
I don't know. It's something we can look at. I don't know if signage will help. I don't know the answer to that, but it's certainly something we can explore and take a look at. We'll see if we can find some other jurisdictions maybe that have tried something like that.
Very good.
So I sit about 40 yards from 321, 5 days a week, 8 hours a day. And I've had this thought that speed doesn't necessarily equal noise on 321, and that's kind of what I'm hearing. And when I hear a loud vehicle and look up out of my window, it's not the speed necessarily as it is a modified exhaust system, J-braking, and I would say it's not even necessarily, the majority is motorcycles. Modified exhaust with all sorts of cars. And so would you say, I mean, based on what you're telling us, is that we have speeding cars, but definitely in the minority. If you look at 2.8 million cars a year, and that from that data, speeding cars is not necessarily what is causing a noise problem. That it is other factors associated with the particular vehicle. Am I drawing that the correct conclusion
No, I
there?
think that's a fair conclusion. I do know that we have stopped some cars for altered exhaust systems. Like I say, we can be out there and try to stop those when we see them. The most of our traffic noise complaints come from the area near Rock Road, Gideon Ridge, in that area. Most of that traffic noise in that area is being generated by vehicles. Not if you're beyond Rock Road, those vehicles are no longer in the city limits of Blowing Rock. So often we have some requests to do Jake brake enforcement in that area. Number one, I think it's a terrible, terrible safety risk for us to tell truckers to turn their Jake brakes off while they go down that mountain where we know there's a history of traffic fatalities due to truck crashes. So that's a huge safety issue. Second of all, where the noise starts being generated the most is already outside the city limits, which is not within where we typically commit our resources to patrol.
What tools do you, if we're talking about noise with a particular vehicle, what tools do you have available to you to even deal with that?
There is a state law that requires that your exhaust system be according to the manufacturer's original, the way the manufacturer originally created it. It's supposed to be maintained that way. So if it's something obvious, we could cite them for that. As far as the trucks goes, it's a little more complicated because they fall under some federal laws about interstate commerce, and the motor carrier enforcement people told me that they had to actually measure the amount of noise that was coming with an instrument. Then they have to figure out when the truck was manufactured and find out what the standard was at the time the truck was manufactured and compare that and see if it's outside the standard. And they told me they did not have the instruments to measure the sound.
What the humidity was, all that.
Yeah. So the interstate commerce stuff, there are some federal laws that apply there. that would probably supersede any state laws. But as far as a car out here on the highway that somebody just decided to cut the muffler off and run it without it, that is a violation of North Carolina law. And we have stopped cars for that. I can't tell you off the top of my head how many, but that is something we can stop for and cite.
Well, I can tell you, I was on a deck on Clausen Drive, so away from going out of town. And the motorcycles were so deafening that we had to quit talking. And, you know, there's no wall there. You can see how high that is. So I don't know if they're revving up before they get to the parkway. And I can be at my house on Chestnut Drive and walk my dog out at 6:30 to 7:30 in the morning, and I can hear and the trucks aren't going that way, they're going this way, going into town. So it's not just going downhill. But I'm hearing that it's a problem. Is there another avenue? Is there, I'm sure that other towns have the same issues. Is there a way that that y'all can band together and go talk to somebody about, hey, this is a problem, we've got residents?
I think a lot of towns have the same complaints and issues, and I think most towns, most chiefs that I've spoken with implement the same things. They prohibit Jake breaks in certain areas and put up signage. I haven't talked to very many chiefs where that was tremendously effective. I wouldn't think Jake breaks would be an issue coming into town. Maybe coming up to the traffic light or something maybe, but not. Generally, they wouldn't be on the brake too much coming through town, but it's just a matter of resources and where we're going to focus our limited resources, and that's why we're looking at maybe.
Do they put the brakes on if they're going slow?
The way an engine exhaust brake works, if it's engaged and you let off the gas pedal, it's going to try to muffle that, limit that exhaust, and that's what makes the noise.
So that's the noise.
Yeah, that's what makes the noise. So if they let off the gas pedal, it's going to make that it's going to make that noise. If it's a proper exhaust system, it probably shouldn't be very noisy. You're still going to hear it some, but it shouldn't be overly noisy. But again, that depends on the regulations that were in place when the vehicle was manufactured and that kind of thing.
So there's about 2,000 traffic stops a year, if I remember the number correctly.
Yeah, I think last year
1,800 something.
we were around 2,400 for all of last year, and we're on track probably to be around there again this year.
So what, and this may not be a fair question off the top of your head, but what kind of resources would it take to get that to 4,000?
So going back to the very first slide where we had the functions of our police department and the different things, the only way we can commit more resources to traffic safety is to pull resources from doing other things. So it becomes a matter of what do we want to cut out with the manpower we have. Do we want to cut out neighborhood patrols? Do we want to cut out, foot patrols on Main Street? What do we want to cut out to focus more resources? So the only way I know to increase the resources that we use there are to have additional resources that are specific for that purpose. To get to 4,000, that's actually an excellent question, and one that we had some conversation with my officers. I collectively had a little brainstorming session the other day because I was curious if we had a committed traffic safety officer, how many vehicle stops would be fair to expect. The number that we kind of came up with was maybe 10 a day, if that was that person's only responsibility. Now, obviously, we can do some math and figure out how many that is, but during the course of the year, an employee would be off some for vacation, and most of our officers have at least one day a month that they have to go to court, which is another resource drain. So every time for all these cars we stop, we have more court dates to go to. So, I was sort of thinking that maybe 250 or probably 240 days a year, maybe they would be out there. So that would be about 2,400 traffic stops for one person. I think that's probably too high. I think that's probably too high of an estimate. The other issue you run into is, I'll use yesterday as an example, close to where the mayor was, a routine traffic stop was a stolen vehicle. So there's hours. Last night, a routine traffic stop ends up being a a drug arrest and a subject tried to flee from the police, now we've got 2 officers tied up for several hours. So sometimes these simple traffic stops aren't very simple and are time consuming. But we think, I think it's a safe assumption that one officer whose time was dedicated to just that could probably easily do 1,000 traffic stops in a year, I would think. Again, that's sort of there's not much science in that.
Here's okay, to take David's question a little step further. You had mentioned that there's this opportunity to go through the state for additional police or enforcement. How many could you get, just hypothetically? And how many could you see put on traffic enforcement?
The minimum number we would like to see is 2.
Okay.
3 would probably be good. We're still trying to figure out how many, if we should apply for more and hope we get the minimum. We're still gathering some information, but basically that's the Governor's Highway Safety Grant, and it's a shared cost. Governor's Highway Safety pays 100% the first year, 75% the second year, and so forth through a 5-year. The 5th year, the town will pay 100% and from there on. So it's a cost-shared grant. So we're still trying to gather some information on that.
So this is something you're going to bring to council?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Council would have to approve it before we submit an application, yes.
Okay.
But my fear is we can catch more speeders, but that doesn't necessarily equate to a quieter 321.
I don't think it's going to necessarily be quieter. We can stop some more noise-related or some, improperly muffled vehicles. But when you're talking about 2,800,000 cars a year, we can't be there every minute, all the time.
Presence,
The presence makes a difference.
what they do with the motorcycle.
And also, back to talking about how we use our radars and how we use our resources. There's times of the day, 3 o'clock in the morning, there's not going to be a lot of speed enforcement on 321 because there's not any cars. So, there's sometimes during the day that there's too many cars to do speed enforcement. Because the way a radar unit works, it sends out a sound wave. That sound wave bounces off of an object back to the radar unit and calculates the speed. Well, on the report that I had up there a little while ago, there's some periods of time during the day, there may be 400 cars in an hour average traveling. It's almost impossible with our radar equipment. It is impossible. It's not almost. It's impossible with our radar equipment to do speed enforcement because when that signal bounces back, and it may say 55 miles an hour, but we may not be able to figure out which vehicle it was because traffic is too heavy.
That explains some of the, I think, low figures from your radar unit.
Well, the radar unit supposedly records every car.
I don't know how it can.
I don't know. I don't know. I'm just, in theory, it records every car. Our radar units, if you're sitting in a police car and you've got a radar sitting there, it may bounce back a multitude of speeds. So it may capture several speeds. But the officer has to try to figure out which one of those vehicles was actually going 55 and which one was going 45. And that's impossible to do with most of our radar equipment. There's some new technology. We have one typically referred to as a LiDAR. It's a laser. It shoots a laser beam. It's more targeted. We can use it in heavier traffic conditions. We only have one officer certified to use it. So
How quick does it reset?
the radar,
The one you're going to put up out there?
I mean, instantly. It doesn't lock in a speed. It's recording it, and it keeps recording the next speed. So it should instantaneously update every time a car passes.
Well, let me just say that I live with a golf course between me and 321. Number 4? The sound bounces off that retaining wall. I knew that was going to happen.
Yeah, I think that's a huge problem when they widen the highway.
But what makes the noise are these things called pocket rockets. You know what they
I know
are.
exactly what you're talking about.
And big pickup trucks, usually 3/4 ton with knobby tires and gutted mufflers. That's what's doing
The
it.
gutted mufflers, we can definitely stop. The knobby tires, we probably can't do a whole lot about.
But I have protection against self-incrimination, Mr. Attorney. And I will deny saying this. But I come to town 2 to 4 times a day, every day. And I've started setting my radar control on my car at 43 miles an hour. And everything passes me, everything. So I have a problem with that machine that you're referring to.
Well, as I said, I can show you different reports in different places
Well-
that have different, that definitely show more cars in the medium risk. That was just the most recent one, but I have another one with me that the numbers are substantially higher, and that's why I wanted to let you know, that's just a snapshot.
My personal experience is having a problem with that radar thing you're using data. That's not accusatory
Right, I
to
understand.
you personally or any of your policemen, but it is a huge difference. Aaron, I'm not kidding you. When I pull out of Green Hill Road and turn north to come to town, you better get it, because those cars coming up that road there, I mean, you better get it. I'm thinking about trading for BMW 6
Got that on the minute?
I'm being honest with you.
And I understand, this is the best data we have,
Every
the best
day.
equipment that we have to gather that data. I don't know how to get anything better than what we have.
Are you going to place one of the permanent down so that he can pull out slower?
Or you can
Will
pull
it
up
be
the information.
below him? Do you know where you're going to place him?
Where we're planning to place it right now is just past Green Park Inn, before the country club.
Okay.
Before the beginning of the retaining wall.
Okay.
It's been very difficult to find a location for that one on that end as well, so.
Well, I will shut up after this, but I've driven 30,000 miles this year in Eastern America. From Canada, well, Vermont down to here. And speeding is everywhere. I mean, literally everywhere. Speed limit on I-40 is 85 now.
I understand. Well, I never deny that there's speeders on Valley Boulevard. I'm totally aware that there's speeders. We try to give you the best information that we possibly can. We're trying to combat that the best way we know how. We're stopping a lot of cars. Even the yearly total that we stop, though, is probably not equal to the daily average of speeders on 321. So that's kind of the volume that we're up against, so.
When can the residents expect those radars? Because they are effective.
We are just currently waiting on Blue Ridge Electric schedule to come and help us put in some power
Power to it.
so we can get those put up.
That was a very good report, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Chief. Right. Moving right along here, Green Hill Traffic Study. This will be presented by Amy Kemp and Associates, is that correct? That is correct.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
We can.
Excellent. Well, good evening, council members. My name is Michael Karpinski. I'm with Ramey Kemp and Associates. And our team at Ramey Kemp has prepared the traffic study for Green Hill Road. The purpose of the study was to evaluate and determine potential roadway improvements to address safety concerns along Green Hill Road, including speeding and cut-through traffic. I do not have a formal presentation prepared with slides. However, I will share my screen, Shane, if I have the capability here to pull up an aerial. If there are any specific questions, we can hone in on a specific location and go from there. Okay, so you should be seeing the Google Maps aerial at this point. So the first step in our traffic study was to gather all available data for Green Hill Road, including traffic count data at each end of Green Hill Road at 321 and the Blue Ridge Parkway, as well as speed and crash data from the Blowing Rock Police Department. We also held a 1-month online public comment period to gather input from town residents regarding specific concerns of Green Hill Road. So I'll go through a quick summary of the data that was gathered along Green Hill Road. As I mentioned, traffic count data was collected over a 13-hour period at each intersection at the end of Green Hill Road, 321, Blue Ridge Parkway. And we did run a quick analysis based on this traffic count data, and these intersections do not currently or are projected to meet the necessary signal warrants from the manual and uniform traffic control devices to warrant signalization, primarily due to the residential nature of Green Hill Road and the distinct peak traffic periods in the morning and afternoon peak times when you'd expect residential traffic to be traveling to or from their home and from work. So the second item of data we collected was working with the Blowing Rock Police Department. They provided us with crash data from March of 2013 through December of 2020 along Green Hill Road. And based on this crash data, there were 12 total crashes reported over this 8-year period. A majority of the reported crashes on Green Hill Road were likely due to a combination of vehicles driving too fast for the conditions, the horizontal curvature of Green Hill Road, and the narrow travel lanes that exist out there currently. We also worked with Blowing Rock Police Department. They provided us with speed data along Green Hill Road between Heather Ridge Lane and Edge Hill Lane. So this is kind of more towards the Blue Ridge Parkway side of Green Hill Road here. Right along this section here, around the 1500 block. Green Hill Road, it has a posted speed limit of 25 miles per hour. And the speed data that was collected in May and June of 2021 indicated that motorists on Green Hill Road were traveling at an average of 25 miles per hour with an 85th percentile speed of 34 miles per hour. And that 85th percentile speed is the speed at which 85% of drivers travel at or below. So based on a review of the data that was gathered in collaboration with town staff, as well as our own independent data collection, the following speeding countermeasures, cut-through traffic countermeasures, and intersection improvements at Green Hill Road and Green Hill Circle were considered. So I'm going to go through these pretty quickly, just give kind of the highlights of them, as there are a fair number of these. After I get through these, I'm happy to circle back and kind of dig into some of the finer details of these specific recommendations or countermeasures, rather. So the first one we have is always stop control. And as council and public are aware, Green Hill Circle and Green Hill Road is a prime example of this traffic control device with stop signs on all approaches at the intersection. The next speeding countermeasure we evaluate with speed humps, which create vertical deflection designed to reduce vehicle speeds. These are typically laid perpendicular to your travel lanes across the roadway. The next speeding countermeasure we evaluated was enhanced curve delineation. So this includes improved striping and signing in advance of upcoming changes in horizontal alignment to alert drivers to conditions that may call for a reduction in speed or an action in the interest of safety. So some examples of warning signs include turn or curve ahead signs, winding road, or like an S-turn, chevrons, which are the big rectangular arrows pointing in the direction of the horizontal curvature, a combination of horizontal alignment and intersection signs. So these would include a right-hand turn or left-hand turn that shows an intersecting roadway along the path of that turn to bring awareness to motorists of an oncoming intersection within that horizontal curve. In addition to warning signs, some of the pavement markings would include retroreflective yellow center lines and white lane line pavement markings, as well as yellow reflective center line markings. So these would include the actual pavement markings themselves. I believe out there currently, they may just be painted yellow and white lane lines to delineate the travel lanes along Green Hill Road. There is the resources or capability to upgrade those to be retroreflective or thermoplastic, so they're a little bit more reflective, especially in the evening hours with vehicles and their headlights. And the yellow reflective centerline markings are basically lane line delineators that they shine back to the user driving along the road, reflected from the headlights as they travel along the roadways. And finally, the The last speeding countermeasure we evaluated for Green Hill Road was speed feedback signs. As the chief talked about earlier, these are portable interactive signs that display a vehicle's current speed to remind drivers to slow down. So next, we evaluated two cut-through traffic countermeasures. The first is Google Maps, and I'm going to expand on this a little bit as the title of it is a little bit misleading or doesn't provide the full picture of that particular countermeasure. So Google Maps, GPS, of course, everyone has used it before to travel to and from a destination. So Google Maps may recommend Green Hill Road as an alternative route for tourists visiting the town when the Blue Ridge Parkway is open, and if there's congestion or lane closures or construction on the surrounding roadways during a certain time of day or a certain day of the week. Again, Google Maps may route Green Hill Road as an alternative to some of the other routes in the area to get to the user to that point in the fastest route possible. As a personal example, I'm from Raleigh, North Carolina, and when I came to do a field visit to Green Hill Road, I put in the Green Park Inn as my final destination down at 321. And once I got into town, it took me through Blue Ridge Parkway and then down Green Hill Road to Green Park Inn, instead of, for example, continuing either along Blue Ridge Parkway all the way over to Valley Boulevard 321, or we go further up, rather than going down Blue Ridge Parkway, get there eventually, continuing along 421 into Perkinsville and further into Boone and then down 321 that way. So that was just kind of a personal example I wanted to share is, depending ultimately on the origin and destination of a vehicle trip, whether they're coming from out of town or from within town limits, Google Maps may recommend Green Hill Road as the fastest route to reach that driver's destination. So our recommendation regarding this is for town staff to work with Google Maps to remove Green Hill Road as a routing alternative to reduce the cut-through traffic between US 321 and the Blue Ridge Parkway. And these algorithms that Google uses are very intricate. Of course, when I say removing Green Hill Road as a routing alternative, that would not include destinations along Green Hill Road or the roads otherwise. Essentially, it would remove Green Hill Road as a possibility as a route between 2 points. And if you're still hoping to reach a destination along Green Hill Road or the intersections or roads that are along Green Hill Road, that would still be a possibility. This is a practice that has been implemented here in Raleigh. We're working with them on kind of the process and procedural items as how the town can best coordinate with them to work with them on removing that. But it has been implemented and has been effective in an example here in Raleigh, as an example. So the second cut-through traffic countermeasure that we evaluated was selective exclusion signs. And these signs provide notice to roadway users that either state or local statutes or ordinances exclude designated types of traffic from using a particular roadway or facility. Currently, as drivers enter Green Hill Road from US 321 or the Blue Ridge Parkway, there is existing signing indicating no trucks over 2 axles. However, these signs may not necessarily be visible to commercial vehicles and truck traffic until they have already entered and started their path down Green Hill Road, in which case it would be very challenging for those types of vehicles to reverse course. So our recommendation in this particular case is enhanced signing along Green Hill Road and in advance along 321 and the Parkway to improve and just provide better notice for motorists of the restricted access along Green Hill Road pertaining to commercial vehicles and vehicles larger than 2 axles. And finally, we did look at the Green Hill Road and Green Hill Circle intersection for potential safety improvements at that particular location. And our recommendations there included were basically in addition to the always stop control, traffic control that's there currently, there are advanced stop ahead signs prior to actually reaching the destination in both directions on Green Hill Road. However, traveling the corridor, it's kind of unclear how far away from the intersection you are when you come into contact with those stop ahead signs. So one of our recommendations was to was to add supplemental distance plaques to those stop-ahead signs that currently exist on Green Hill Road to provide the motorists and roadway users a quantitative distance of when they can expect to arrive at the stop control intersection downstream. And then the second recommendation we had was transverse rumble strips on Green Hill Road in advance of the Green Hill Circle intersection, again, just to bring awareness to motorists of the downstream intersection and the upcoming stop control at the intersection of Green Hill Road and Green Hill Circle. So with that, I will pause for any questions from council and happy to expand on any of the items that I touched on briefly.
Council?
I think I heard yellow center line, what did you call it, updating it? And what did you say about the signage or painting on the sides of the road, edge of the road? Did you say something about that?
Yes, sir. So that was part of the enhanced kind of curve delineation. And so as far as upgrades to the pavement markings, there is a specific type of material related to lane lines that's kind of what's known as retroreflective or thermoplastic. And essentially what that is it's more reflective. It bounces light off of the paint itself in low light conditions and in kind of evening hours. Just to bring more awareness of the actual the lane lines themselves, both the yellow center line and the white edge lines for motorists to for them to know where their lane line is, or they're currently in, and looking downstream as their headlights project light in front of them.
I've seen those, and they also contain a rumble strip. Have you seen that?
I have, yes. That's actually something we did consider, and I personally wouldn't recommend that in this application. One, that the lanes are fairly narrow, so I would imagine it's fairly frequent that as roadway users are looking downstream and traversing the curbs, that their tires would go over the rumble strips on these lane lines. So I think that would produce additional noise for the residents along Green Hill Road that may be undesired.
Well, it forces you back toward the center line. You're right
Sure.
about that.
Yes, sir.
Where did you suggest any other all-way stops other than the one at Green Hill Circle?
So not as a part of our recommendations. Let me flip back to that section of the report. And the reason for that is specific to evaluating speeding countermeasures. So the manual and uniform traffic control devices, I'm going to call it MUTCD for short, as it's a little bit of a mouthful. It's an industry standard that's used by folks in the consultant world, engineering world, as well as municipalities at state level, city level, town level, as well as at the federal level. So they provide just general guidance on kind of uniform application of traffic control devices across the country. And they provide guidance that says that yield or stop signs should not be used for speed control. And they also provide guidance as far as minimum volume criteria for intersections that would apply or would be applicable for always stop consideration. And based on just the existing volumes along Green Hill Road, it's unlikely that these additional intersections along Green Hill Road would meet the minimum volume criteria to warrant always stop consideration. And to expand on that a little bit, the addition of always stop along Green Hill Road at intersections with minimal traffic on the side streets may result in stop signs that would be added as part of the always stop on Green Hill Road to effectively operate under yield conditions or drivers ignoring the traffic control altogether due to the low volumes on the side streets. And to give you an example, just gonna zoom in and pick a location. So let's look at Edge Hill Lane, for example. Just counting the rooftops here, I see 4, 5, maybe 6 homes along Edge Hill Lane. So the introducing of always stop control at this particular intersection, for the purposes of speed control, I personally would not recommend, again, given the guidance from MUTCD. And part of the thought there is Edge Hill Lane doesn't really have a significant level of traffic volume, and, for motors that are traveling past this intersection on Green Hill Road, if they can see that there's no one on the Edge Hill Lane approach waiting to enter the intersection, it's very likely that they'll either perform a rolling stop or just continue right on through without even tapping the brakes. Now, that being said, circling back to Green Hill Road and Green Hill Circle, always stop control can be implemented from a safety standpoint if there's insufficient line of sight, or if there's grade changes, or if there's foliage and limbs and trees that are blocking the path, or in the case of, again, this intersection here, you have a significant horizontal curve of both Green Hill Circle and Green Hill Road approaching this intersection. So always stop control can certainly be implemented from a safety standpoint, and in reviewing this area, I think a prime candidate for consideration that I would recommend for always stop control is the intersection here of Green Hill Road and Fairway 11 Court. It's similar in type and application to Green Hill Road and Green Hill Circle, in that this intersection is along a horizontal curve. In this particular application, it's a 90-degree turn. Driving this area, whether you're coming from either direction, there is limited line of sight. 4 vehicles that are sitting on on Fairway 11 Court, wishing to turn on Green Hill Circle, and vice versa for folks traveling through this intersection on Green Hill Road, passing Fairway 11 Court from both directions. So that's certainly something, a consideration we would recommend to the town, similar to the Green Hill Road and Green Hill Circle improvement that was done just down the road there. That would be my recommendation for always stop control from a safety standpoint.
Can you give me, this is David Harwood, can you give me some clarification on the rumble strips at Green Hill Road and Green Hill Circle intersection? Because it looks like you're recommending those, but then there's the MUTCD indicates that they should not be placed on a sharp horizontal or vertical curve.
Sure, yeah, so you're absolutely right in that the MUTCD does provide guidance that they should not be placed on a sharp curve. So they would just need to be placed in a similar location to where the stop ahead signs are, either forward or behind those particular locations, along a section that is not a horizontal, sharp horizontal curve. So that would just be, we would need to do a little more evaluation on where those particular rumble strips would be implemented in each direction on Green Hill.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Who goes to war against Google?
We do.
The town would.
You want to do that?
I'm gonna let Shane
And as I mentioned before, we're gonna help Shane out in that battle if he's the one taking that to Google. As I mentioned, I'm personally aware of a case in Raleigh here where the city did work with Google to remove a particular road. I think in this application it was a private street. But it is possible. It holds a lot more weight coming from a municipality versus a private citizen, of course. And ultimately, the town has ownership of Green Hill Circle, or at least a large portion of it. So it is something that would have to come from the municipal level.
Could you elaborate again for me a little more on why they do not recommend a stop sign for speed control?
It's mainly because...
Wait, slow somebody down, it should stop them.
Right, but the thought is the typical application of always stop, or at least the warrants that MUTCD has for always stop, there needs to be sufficient volume on all approaches for that particular intersection to meet the criteria outlined. They want to have a constant flow of traffic on all approaches and not have an ununiform distribution of traffic on the main line without a lot of traffic on the minor street approaches or the side street approaches. Essentially, just from a safety standpoint, they don't want to create a condition for folks running stop signs in the chance that it becomes a pattern if there aren't a lot of traffic on the side streets.
So you essentially recommended three-way stop, correct me if I'm mistaken, this is Charlie Sellers, Green Hill and Fairway Court, is that correct?
It wasn't in the traffic study that we did, just because we were specifically looking at speeding and cut through traffic countermeasures. But from a safety standpoint, certainly I would recommend that the Green Hill Road and Fairway 11 Court is a prime candidate for consideration.
Yeah. That's good.
Just given the horizontal curvature of Green Hill Road going through that intersection and the limited sight distance on all the approaches.
This is David Harwood. The always stop at the intersection of Green Hill Road and Green Hill Circle, there was not a traffic study done when those stop signs were put in. And the impetus for that was an adjacent school bus stop, too. Was there any consideration that maybe those stop signs should be removed?
We did not consider removing those. And in my opinion, the always stop control at Green Hill Road and Green Hill Circle is the appropriate application at that location, given the horizontal curvature and the limited sight distance and the changing grade on all approaches at that particular intersection.
Okay, good, thank you.
Council? Okay. Thank you so very much.
You're welcome.
Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. You too. Figure out how to stop sharing my screen
Doug, did
here,
you have
Shane.
You were waving at me. Did you have a thought on that, Doug?
I've got a couple of ideas that I'm looking at, and I'm waiting to get back some answers. A couple of them are from the state, and so I'd rather just wait and maybe in November bring a couple of them forward.
Okay. All right, moving right along here, stormwater quality, Mosaic Inc. Good evening.
Good evening.
Welcome.
Thank you. I'm Teresa Buckwalter. I'm with Mosaic Civic Studio. We're based in Boone, but we've done work in Blowing Rock, and I live in Kevin's neighborhood, so I'm de facto a Blowing Rock resident. And my business partner is Taylor Broyhill, and she's the planner. So she looked through some of your ordinances, looking at water quality from that standpoint. She couldn't be here tonight, but she also is a de facto Blowing Rock person because she got her start as a planner here. Okay, so we're going to start with the presentation. Do you mind if I look over your shoulder? Sure. Because that's going to help me. Okay, great. Okay, so we were hired by the Civic Association really to, do you mind going back one slide there? One of the projects that we have worked on with you all is the trailhead of the Middle Fork Greenway. And the trailhead, so we were the lead design on that, working with you all and working with the Department of Transportation. And that project just received a North Carolina American Planning Association Award for Great Healthy Places. So congratulations to you all and to the Middle Fork Greenway. So thinking of Middle Fork Greenway in that regard, and working with Tim Gupton, he hired us the Civic Association hired us to look at, is there a way that we can continue the Middle Fork Greenway? Maybe it could look different, but how do we look at that? And so from there, if you don't mind, the next slide. the purpose of the study was really to look at two things. Once we got kind of looking at the Middle Fork Greenway there at the creek, we did a drone flight over there last year. And so right through that area, we looked at, man, there could be some significant kind of water quality improvements through that area. And so these two things could go hand in hand. So we looked at both of those options. And so with the drone footage, and we can go forward, thank you. So the two purposes of the study were to evaluate the potential of the Middle Fork recreation and the aesthetic amenity. This came directly from the Valley Vision Plan. And then also, what are some things that we could do to improve the health of the water and the water quality? Right there. So we can go to the next one. There are some sweet little spots along the creek that we also discovered. But looking at this from a 20,000-foot standpoint, okay, awesome, thank you. Your watershed, of course, this is your district. And then looking at the two different types of the water supply watershed, this is the green one. So this is a more highly developed part of your watershed. And of course, the purple is the less highly developed. But that's kind of looking at this from a 20,000-foot standpoint. And we'll go in and zoom in a little closer here. With the drone footage, we sort of did this analysis. Specifically, our geographic scope was really Main Street coming here, and then this is the entrance to Chatola, the gem stores here, and the creek I highlighted here just so you all could see it a little bit better. On the aerial photos, it kind of gets lost because there's all this vegetation. There's a lot of vegetation. Some of it's invasive, and some of it's good. But anyway, so we highlighted that. So kind of coming down through here, this is Cornish Street, and then coming down to Sunset. And then we actually continued looking at this area all the way near the ABC store, all the way to where the main branch kind of crosses over at the fire station. So that was sort of our geographic scope. We didn't really go beyond that. We just kind of wanted to look at what are some opportunities here, what are some constraints. And so what are some of the issues here? This particular section has been noted as an impaired by DWQ, the Department of Environmental Quality. So why did this get this impaired designation? And that's for thermal pollution, so too warm. And then that's also for erosion. So if you get sedimentation and erosion and thermal pollution. So I showed one of the ponds. You know, the ponds are something that used to be a treatment that people would use often, but they actually contribute to the thermal pollution because of, you have that large surface area of the pond, and the sun hits it. There's very little vegetation there. And so then that kind of goes back into the creek and causes more thermal pollution. The fish are less happy as well. There's some other things going on here. I didn't highlight everything, but there definitely, the lack of buffer. Now, your ordinance does have a 30-foot buffer, which is great, but these are, probably older, and you've got the parking lots that there's approximately 30 feet, but it's actually in total, it really should be 30 feet from the stream over to the parking lot. So it's really, in some places, it gets pretty tight, like maybe 10 or 15-foot vegetated buffer. And that vegetated buffer is, you all probably know this, is what you want to see in terms of taking up some of those pollutants coming off of the parking lot, and also any kind of rainwater that's coming in gives it a little more time to absorb into the ground before it goes into the creek and causes pollution and heating it up. So we can go to the next one. And then just smaller things that kind of add up, like down here, there's quite a bit, and nobody's fault, of course, but just a lot of invasive plant species that come in. And so if there's a way that there could be some restoration of getting rid of the invasives, even though they're kind of shading the creek, if you could get underneath there and look, they're not holding the bank in place. It's really eroding. And so the Japanese knotweed is the worst. It's a real problem in a lot of places. And just some other areas, but some opportunities that we have for improvements in this area are really to regrade the stream banks so that they're a little more gentle, so that you don't have this, really sharp stream banks. To replace ponds with maybe stormwater wetlands, and even though we say a wetland, it doesn't have to look ugly. It can have very nice plant species in it. You can go to the next one. And you can even incorporate, like up in the upper left, You can incorporate stormwater measures right into the streetscape and/or permeable pavers. I worked on a project in the town of Boone with permeable pavers. It really helps to, again, sort of take up pollutants before they get into the creek, and so it stores water and it also prevents water from rushing from parking lots right into this creek, right? It sort of holds that water for a little while, and that's what we want. We love to see this, which is more of this, which is the culverts having the actual stream bottom. So that stream bottom makes it possible for those aquatic invertebrates to go up and down the stream, and then the fish are happy because they've got more things to eat. So there's a lot of places where the culverts, there's a drop. So the stormwater culvert kind of drops the water, maybe half a foot. That really disconnects your watershed. So we'd love to see more of that. So, and looking at the opportunities here, this is a fun one. And thinking about the Middle Fork Greenway, you can't imagine really a 10-foot wide paved path in the way that it is in other places, right? So in this area, because it's tight through there, small tracts of land, it could be more of a natural surface, or even if that's sort of hardened in some way, that maybe just a 3-foot wide to 5-foot wide trail, a walking path that could really connect the Blowing Rock trailhead for the Middle Fork Greenway, which eventually, as we all know, will continue on and go to Boone. But that you could really kind of bring along the sidewalk, have a crossing, and then have, of course, has to be with the consent of landowners and easements and things like that, but potentially a trail that is unobtrusive along the Middle Fork. And it's actually less than a mile to get from the trailhead to downtown. And so you could have this walking path that really could provide this great user experience. And then kind of taking a page from other communities, you could really kind of incentivize new development kind of facing, almost like a trail-oriented development, right? And so you could have new commercial, you could incentivize, bike parking, having the facade of the building kind of also facing the creek, as opposed to the creek and the trail having just the backside of buildings. And so really kind of screening and seating and murals, kind of incentivizing these items. And the next one, and even the types of uses that are really appropriate for a trail. So retail, entertainment, bars and restaurants. Next slide. Thank you. Here's an example from the Swamp Rabbit Trail. It's really just a hardware store, which is great. And cars very frequently will park in the parking lot, but they also kind of face the trail. And so they understand that people could jump off and use the hardware store. They also have an ice cream place. But really the parking for bicycles, the landscaping, the signage really addresses the trail. And so then that's just really integrates business into the trail use and promotes that in a nice way. So we looked at, this kind of gets more into the sort of planning details, and Tim and I, we're going to share the full, we presented this to the planning board, and we'll share with you all the very full slides that show all of those recommendations, but I wanted to kind of shorten it for tonight, but we can provide that to you. One of the kind of main recommendations here is to look at potentially an overlay district that has somewhat really emphasizes water quality in this area, kind of between Ransom and Valley Boulevard. And it's not a huge area, but there could be kind of looking at different ordinances. And so I'll kind of hit the highlights of those. We can skip that one and go to the next. So this is the final slide, kind of the takeaways, kind of looking at specific ordinances of yours to really kind of get to the nitty-gritty of what we're talking about in terms of promoting trail use, but also water quality. Looking at amending 16.4 to allow trails and parks within the 30-foot buffer. Amending 13.3 to require all new developments to provide easements for trails identified in town plans. And so if it's been identified in a town plan that's been adopted. Kind of orientation of the principal building facade that we talked about earlier. The establishment of the Middle Fork Overlay District. So the point of this would be stream and stormwater standards for that particular area. and also just requiring non-conforming structures and to comply with this district standards when redeveloping. So understandably, a lot of these tracts of land, these parcels right along the Middle Fork, in the past, buildings were very close to the actual creek, right? So that presents a challenge for water quality and the creek stabilization. So establish a lower erosion and sediment control threshold. Right now, developers will hit that threshold at half an acre. So if you all could, for this particular area, reduce that so that these smaller parcels, if you're doing something that's maybe a quarter acre, you also have to go through that erosion and sediment control review process because that's really going to help with your water quality. And then ensure the code enforcement, of course, of pollution and watershed ordinances, and even new stormwater programs and funding. And then the last one, this is really sort of the takeaway message, is that because it's an impaired stream, so that's not a great thing, but it also sets you into this position of being able to get greater grant money, so better grant funding from DEQ for impaired streams. And so this could be a couple of different grants sources. Of course, this would have to be in conjunction with the landowners, but you could really get money that you could do stream restoration at the same time as you do trail development. And so it could be this really comprehensive kind of project that could also include some grant funding. And those grant funding cycles tend to be in the springtime. So that's the presentation, kind of condensed down, but would love to have your questions and see what we can.
Could you give us I've brought up permeable pavers, and there's been negative in the literature about it. Can you give us an update has that changed?
Some of they have to be really maintained. And so if they get full of sediment, that's not a good thing. So they'd have to essentially be vacuumed. And so if you get somebody a contractor who's put these in and who also would maintain it, that's a really key thing. I'm not sure of the other negative, it's still very much sort of, NC State has their stormwater kind of engineering department that they do. They do a lot of education to consultants and other folks. They're still very much in favor of permeable pavers. I think that the key is to keep the maintenance up. We did the project that we did in Boone was with NC State, and so we looked at, we essentially took out the bituminous pavement there on a parking lot and put in underground cells that were of different depths and different materials to do the research on which actually takes up pollutants better before it went into Trout Creek and Boone. And so NC State has some data on kind of which is the best treatment underground, but on top it looks the same. It's looks like the brick pavers. So it's a really nice application for, if you want it to look good. One of the downsides would be that it's more expensive, of course, than on other treatments. But there are, like I said, that particular project was grant funded through Clean Water Management Trust Fund as a demonstration project. So. And Clean Water Management Trust Fund doesn't always get tapped into when it comes to innovative stormwater programs. And so they've got the other programs that really get tapped into, but that one is a little bit less used. And so I think that there are opportunities for sure.
Have you looked at the update United Community Bank did to that feeder into the New River on their property?
No, I have not seen, that's just a little bit outside of our study area. And like I said, we kind of flew that drone a year ago, but I haven't seen, tell me more about that.
It's a huge plus.
Yeah.
Got a lot of sediment went into that New River right there.
Yeah. So if you get more and more things like that, that can, because the pollution, the water quality issues really come from, it's like very small, it adds up, right? It's like all these little small things that adds up, non-point source pollution. So those little measures that you can take all along your watershed are really key.
Well, go by and look at it one day.
I will. I'll take a look at it.
Any questions?
Yeah, I'm aware there's 2 ponds, I believe. But it appears to me that the stream bypasses those ponds. Is it feeding off of them and then getting put back into the?
I don't know, I mean, we didn't sort of look underneath, but generally speaking, a pond would be an online pond, which it fills up because of the water coming in, and then it comes back out into the creek usually. But those specific ones, whether or not they're, I mean, I would think that they would have to be online, meaning that it's connected to the Middle Fork.
Well, it must be underground.
Yeah, yep, it's usually,
Yeah, okay.
yep. But I mean, despite that, I mean, we kind of are looking at a couple things of both thermal pollution as well as habitat. So a pond really has very little kind of wildlife habitat.
Thank you so very much. Thank you for coming. I want to thank BRCA and Tim.
That was a very nice presentation.
And moving forward, since BRCA has pushed us along, might be interesting to look at you guys maybe addressing this on a sectional, bringing it back, doing it in sections. Just a thought, because it needs to be cleaned up. It does. So thank you. Guys?
I just got a text that our man Bill McCarter on the planning board has been in touch with Google. Did we know that?
Is he trying to know?
I mean, I'm talking about notifying Google.
About Green Hill?
Did not know that.
Okay, moving right along. This next section is a public hearing. If you would like to speak on this public hearing on downtown density, you would need to be able to go over and speak to Hillary and be sworn in. No swearing in? Okay. So, retract that last statement. But they still have to sign up.
Mr. Mayor.
They didn't let her know.
Yeah. But you still do have to.
They just raise their hand.
Just want to raise your hand? Okay.
Mr. Mayor.
All right.
Would you like to do 5 before we get into this one? Or you want to go?
I have a request for an 8-minute break. So we will break for about 8 to 10 minutes, guys. We'll say 10 minutes.
Thank you.
We ought to ask the attorney how he got in here today.
All righty. Albert,
Okay,
quit
you're
stealing
welcome.
her coffee. Quit stealing her coffee. All right, we're back in session. Mr. Rothrock.
Yes, sir. All right, Mayor and Council. Before you, I've got a draft ordinance to review downtown residential density for our central business and town center districts. Back in September, on the 14th, the Planning Board Subcommittee of Chairman Pete Guarini, Bill McCarter, and Sam Glover and I discussed the residential density limits in downtown area, specifically town center and central business. We spoke about some existing residential properties downtown and the applicable densities, and we discussed some recent projects and proposals that we reviewed. There was consideration of the 2014 comprehensive plan that recommends increasing residential density in downtown to at least 8 units per acre. Discussion led the group to evaluate multiple possible residential densities such as 8 units per acre, 12, 16, and 20 units per acre. If you recall, both of Steve Hetherington's projects, Main and Pine, and what he had originally proposed at Pine and Laurel were 20 units per acre, 20 units per acre projects. The two residential projects originally proposed on the Barker property up behind Speckled Trout were, one was 17 units per acre and one was 13 units per acre, respectively. And then for reference, Village Green on Main Street is 20 units per acre, and then the Gables across the street is 17 units per acre. After much consideration of all other limiting development regulations such as building height, setbacks, impervious limits, and parking, the subcommittee proposed that residential density not be a limiting factor in the central business or town center zoning districts. So in other words, the subcommittee recommended no limit on residential density in the form of maximum dwelling units per acre. This was presented to the planning board, and at their September meeting, they approved this draft text to amend our ordinance unanimously. So that draft ordinance is simply, there is a section in our ordinance that deals with residential density throughout town. R6, R15, R10, and additionally, there's other sections that refer back to that table, and this section here, 16-12.2.3, specifies lots in the RMH, which is mobile home, central business, general business, and HMC zoning districts, where residential developments are permissible, may be developed if you're going to do multifamily at the R6M district ratio, which is 5 units per acre. So what has been proposed is that properties in central business and town center would not be subject to those residential density limits. Included the draft ordinance for your review, and this comes from a recommendation from the planning board from last month. This is what you asked us to look at, and so this is the recommendation that has been forwarded to you. Be glad to answer questions, and Chairman Green is here as well on behalf of the planning board.
Did you also look at parking?
We did not.
Okay.
We were asked to just look at density at this time.
Okay. And you're going to have to explain this to me because
Okay.
I'm not, so how would this change affect the 1150 Main? I know it's already done, so we're not talking
Right.
about anything that wouldn't, but how could this change it? Could they increase the inside as far as more rooms inside?
The way that was developed, no, it wouldn't change. Their residential density was capped at 20. That's what the number came out to be with the development that they proposed. And there are 4 units in the front building. I think at least 2 are 1-bedroom units, and there are, I think, two two-bedroom units. And then the building behind is just 2 units, and they're both two-bedroom. Wouldn't have changed that one. But that wouldn't have been an issue. They said, this is what we're proposing. The building height restricts us to this number, 35 feet, I think it was. The setbacks force us in on both Main Street and Pine Street. Parking, they provided the parking that they needed. So all those other limiting factors dictated how big that building was going to be. If they stuck to 5 units per acre residential, they would have had 2 dwelling units on that property.
2 more than they have?
No, just 2.
Oh.
2 total. So they would have had to have been creative and done more retail space and parking, and then just 2 units. And that, those would have been 3 or 4 bedrooms. But that's really not what people are looking for in a downtown residence. It's not a 3 and 4 bedroom. That's really not what the market's aimed at. More than 1 and 2 is probably what the market is geared towards in the downtown area.
So when are you going to look at parking?
I don't know.
Because I think the confusing thing is grandfathering in. And that needs to be, because that's from what, 2010? That they changed that? The council
Yes.
then?
Yes. And we came back in August, we were asked to look at density, and we came back and said, do you want us just to focus on density, or you want us to look at other things, including parking? And the board said, we want you to look at density, and so we did. We know we need to look at the rest of it, including west side, east side of Main Street. Both of those are different in how they're developed, and we need to craft our ordinance to reflect that. And then we need to look at the rest of central business, and maybe there needs to be some increased building height or reduced. We need to look at all of it.
And parking.
And parking, yes.
Thank you.
Kevin, how would this affect the Rainy Lodge? Would it had any impact at all?
On the hotel itself?
Yes.
None.
Okay.
But the previous projects, one,
The
as I mentioned.
condos, yes.
The one was it was a 16-unit, it's just under an acre, so the ratio is about 17 units per acre. And then the next one that came back to planning board was 12 units. That would have, without the density cap, that would have gone through.
Okay.
I would have expected that would have gone on through.
Okay.
Because it looks like regardless of the density, you're still having to develop to the code of setback, height, and parking, which is going to regulate whether you have 5 or whether you have 10.
Right. All those limiting factors, setback, building height, buffers, if it's in the watershed, which is everything from here down towards Sunset, down to Sunset, those are also limited by impervious maximum. So you could, especially if it's a vacant lot, you can only armor or pave over and build on 36% and sometimes allowed to go up to 70. So those are other limiting factors in addition to density.
Yes, we have public like to speak. Yes, would you come up? State your name, address.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council members, Town Manager Fox. I attended the planning board meeting that Kevin referred to, and I understand the logic of removing the density from the criteria because in reality, all the other factors govern the structure and the size when you really look at setback height, green space, and especially parking on site for short-term rental and hotel units. Those are the key factors that are important in our opinion. So we think this approval tonight is really only a first step in the process, and we've indicated in the past that we'd like to see the council instruct planning board to look at the downtown land use code for each section of town, east and west, and further toward Valley, because they're distinctly different. And in particular, we really would like to see a focus on West Main Street, because the comprehensive plan indicates that we, as a town, believe that should be preserved. That's the heart and soul of our community. It represents the authenticity of Blowing Rock, as Roger Brooks mentioned. So focusing on things like setback, using 1150 Main, for example, is only 15 feet from the sidewalk, and the variance was 45 or 75% green space when it basically wasn't any green space anyway. So that's really the fundamental request, is that the council would move forward to look at the detailed land use code areas that are that really govern what things look like, and with an eye toward preserving the authenticity of West Main Street. As we think we all love Blowing Rock, we're unified in that opinion, and we just believe that right now is the same as everything else in central business and town center, but it's distinctly different and needs to be addressed separately.
Thank you, Tim.
Please include it on your winter retreat agenda.
Okay. Would anyone else in the public like to speak? No? Okay. Kevin? Do you have any more questions for Kevin?
I don't proclaim it to Kevin, but I would like to make a statement regarding what Tim had said. I know that and it's something that we do need to look at, is that the 2014 comprehensive plan asks that we update and do our architectural design regulations, to differentiate between the east side and the west side, to try and keep the historic nature and character of Blowing Rock, not having them both look the same.
Mm-hmm. Okay, make note, if you would, Shane, winter retreat.
Sure.
Good. We have a motion.
Move, we approve this. Well, we got to close the public hearing.
Motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor? Okay. Sue? Done. Okay.
We approve this as presented.
Okay. Albert made a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
Second.
The reason is
Okay. Further discussion?
it's redundant and it's confusing, and we have other safeguards to take care of it.
Okay. Any further discussion?
The only other thing I'd like to maybe add to the y'all's retreat would be to ask planning board to be looking at the other building height, setbacks, parking, and east and west side and green space.
For the winter retreat?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Now, we're going
Well, it's a
to exclude-
suggestion. Huh?
They've just done, we've just done, we're excluding that.
Yeah, central business.
Okay.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion?
I'd like to say, this feels like deja vu all over again.
Yeah, I bet it does.
And there are members of this board that sent me home with my tail between my legs over this issue. So I'm really glad that it's come back around and it's being considered, and that there is a good understanding of the other factors such as setbacks, green space, parking requirements, impervious area that limit that. So I am all in favor of this. So thank you to the planning board.
We are educated.
Any other?
I'm glad that your identity eludes you.
Moving forward. Albert, how do you vote?
I believe you believe that.
Albert, vote. David?
Oh, yes.
Okay. Sue?
Yes.
And Doug? Yes. Okay, so motion passes.
Thank you.
All righty, now we get to see Mr. Harwood and Mr. Green. Part F, update in Memorial Park bathrooms.
It'll be not the first time.
Hello, Ms. Brown. How are you?
Sometimes justice takes a long road.
A weird way of getting back.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. During the Town Council retreat in January, the Park Strategy Committee presented a drawing of park improvement needs to Town Council. Town Council encouraged the Park Strategy Committee to pursue applying for a Parks and Recreation Trust Fund grant. The Park Strategy Committee worked with McGill and Associates and the High Country Council of Governments and submitted a Part F grant application by the end of April. The total projected cost is $1.285 million. The town has approximately $430,000 in bond money, and if Part F awarded the grant, that would be $500,000. The $355,000 difference would be provided with ABC and TDA funds. During the March 9th Town Council meeting, a discussion about the Part F grant point system took place and was explained that the proposed renovation and expansion of the restrooms in Memorial Park would not help or hurt our request for Part F money. It was decided that if we did not receive the Part F grant, we could move forward with the renovation and expansion of restrooms in Memorial Park with the TDA and ABC money as the funding source. The Parks and Recreation Authority Board met on September 24th and reviewed 55 Part F applications statewide. Out of 55 applications, Blowing Rock's application was ranked first, but unfortunately, our project did not get funded. There are 7 criteria that is considered when deciding on funding, and ranking is only one of those. There is still a possibility that our project could get funded if the governor passes the budget that has been presented. In the proposed budget, there is additional funding for Part F projects, and if passed, the Part F Authority Board will fund more projects this year. We are requesting to move forward with the design, engineering, and bidding on renovating and adding restrooms to Memorial Park while we wait on the approved budget and possible Part F funding. As stated earlier, moving forward with renovation and addition of restrooms will not affect our Part F scoring or funding because no points were given for the restroom facilities. The $355,000 that TDA and ABC would be providing would cover the restroom costs, and the Part F funding and current bond money would cover the other park improvements in our grant request. And Doug Chapman with McGill is here to provide details on the cost, design, engineering, and bidding of the restrooms. And if you have any questions for me.
Joel, is there research on how many bathrooms and toilets you need?
Yes.
Do we have enough for all the people we're seeing?
Absolutely not. And even adding the current ones still will not provide enough.
What would it take?
I think the best, yeah, the best guidance we have is similar to when there's festivals or concerts and things of that nature, and it's over 100 for the number of folks that we have here. So
Well,
it's
and
not
you can
feasible.
always do, for festivals and stuff, you can always do the Porta Johns. But
Correct.
what is it for if we have a normal weekend or a normal?
Nowadays, normal is a lot. We can't give you any numbers currently. Our system that we were normally pinging cell phones and stuff, that is no longer able to provide numbers of people who are in our parks. But I can tell you that this past weekend with rain on Saturday, the park was packed. I had staff who would make a round, and by the time they would get back, the trash can was 3 feet tall over. And that is cleaning bathrooms, emptying trash cans. There's just people. There's lots of people. There's more people even than probably last year at this time, and we thought we couldn't get any busier. We can't provide probably enough restrooms ever to be sufficient for the number of people here, but we can offer more. What we have now is not nearly enough.
Do we need to increase what you're recommending, is what I was wondering. It didn't seem like a whole lot. I mean, we've got 2 at Brom.
We have ideas for restrooms in other places that our Park Strategy Committee has talked about. We're kind of in that process of evaluating each one of our parks, and we are all kind of getting together. Mr. Harwood has put together really good evaluation sheets on each park, and so we're going through all of those and addressing the things we're doing well, the things we could improve on, our current needs, long-term and short-term goals. And so kind of our plan with all of that is to get all that together and really come to council at retreat and say, here's our plan and here's what we would, what we need. This is kind of a first step because Memorial Park is probably the busiest park we have, obviously, in town, and the most people that come here. And the fact that it's one of the few public restrooms that we have, that makes the most sense right now.
Is the pool open, the pool bathroom open when
It's
the pool's
open until we
closed?
winterize them, yes, but we will be winterizing them probably in November-ish. So, and we also winterized Avant Field because there's no heat in those as well. So then, once that happens, we only have Memorial Park and 2 restrooms at Brom.
And I went in there one day and only one of the toilet in the women's bathroom was working. Has that been fixed?
In Memorial Park?
No, Devant.
Yes, we have a plumber that has been here for the past couple weeks working on.
Okay.
And that's the other part. He's here probably every other week fixing our restroom facilities.
Well, I know, I'm glad y'all looked at other places other than just the park, because Brom especially with me living right there, the line starts about 11 o'clock, and there is a line continuously from 11 to 3 o'clock, usually every Saturday, waiting to get, because it's just one in each bathroom. There's always a huge line there.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts?
How many bathroom, like water closets, urinals are we talking about here?
So what we're currently proposing is that we mimic what we currently have in the park. There's a sort of a foyer that you walk into, so taking the wall there, opening that up, and building another set, and it would be men's and women's both. That way we could shut down half and clean men's and women's on one half, and people can still use the other half. I had staff this weekend who said that they had never been treated that way by people trying to get in to clean the restroom and provide toilet paper and stuff for them. I mean, like, people were just nasty. So we really want to just, in more ways than one, let me tell you, but we want to make it to where we can still, have restroom facilities available for people when we have to close them down to clean or do maintenance.
How many do we currently have in the park?
So there are 6 women's stalls, and then there are 2 men's stalls with 3 urinals.
So you're going to double that number?
Yes.
Okay. What do you think, council?
Well, and I commend you because the bathrooms have greatly improved.
We try.
Keeping them clean and toilet paper. So you've done a really good job with that.
And I think the good thing about going forward with this is, and I think we talked about this, is that it's still in the part of, even though it may not be next year, we'll still be recouping our money back, hopefully. But it's still a project that is in dire need to go forward with.
Yes, sir.
And if I may, Doug, I think our timeline, so our ask tonight for action is to allow for McGill to move forward with the design and engineering and then the bidding and award phase. So we will be coming back to council with the results of those bids. December, January timeframe from a bid result, is that fair to say? January, which would allow us to potentially start construction, obviously, when the weather breaks, with an expectation potentially of having bathrooms completed. Late summer, early fall? Yeah, late summer, early fall.
And just to note that this will not adversely affect our chances for Part F when the state budget is approved.
Well, and I think we talked about it. If it didn't come, we wanted to do this because this was such a critical need.
In March, this was our Plan B.
Yeah.
This was a strategy that we discussed.
Right.
Have a
Do
motion?
you want to talk, or can I go ahead and approve it?
Go ahead. Make a motion, Sue.
I make a motion, we approve the request as presented.
Second.
Do you have any further discussion? Albert? David?
Yes.
Sue?
Yes.
And Doug?
Yes.
Okay, you got it.
Thank you.
If I may, as I pull this up, just say thank you for, to the Park Strategy Group and High Country Council of Governments in McGill for putting together the highest ranked project in the entire state for this past year.
Excellent job there, Dave.
Do they give money to anybody? Do they give money, or
Yes,
do
they
they?
did.
Yeah, there were 14?
14.
Yeah, 14 projects that were awarded out of the 55.
$5 million.
Yeah, $5 million was distributed among 14 projects.
That hurts me.
All right, moving right along. Wastewater Road, culvert repair.
Matt Blackman.
Matt, is Matt here? Matt Blackburn. Where you
Kevin,
hiding,
where you
Matt?
going?
There he comes.
We'll call him back in here in a second.
Yeah.
Everybody left when you got there.
I know, right? Hurts my
Don't
feelings.
take it personal, but you pretty much cleaned out the aisle.
I know, right? Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council. So the culvert into the wastewater plant, that access is provided to us with two 84-inch or 7-foot culverts, and it's the only access we have to our wastewater plant into the reservoir. About a year ago, I think, after one of the heavy rains we had, we noticed the slope on the inlet side of that culvert starting to fail and deteriorate. So we went in and armored that with riprap and had a small sinkhole kind of open at the top and repaired it. Early this summer, noticed the sinkhole was back. So we kind of watched it, had a couple more big rains, and noticed it's starting to get a little bit larger. So we contacted McGill, had them help us investigate it a little bit more, determined that the bottom of the culvert was starting to rust out, and then there was a couple joints that had opened up, allowing water to infiltrate past the culvert, and which what we believe is causing the sinkhole. Kind of talked about whether we want to replace it or look at it, look at doing something different, determined that spin casting was probably going to be the safest bet. I talked to Ben Barnes when he did that when he was still at Blowing Rock. They had spin casted the culvert and had great success with it. So we went down that road, and I'll let Doug kind of tell you what we found out from them and the processes behind that.
Thank you, Matt. We looked at a couple different routes. Just so you'll know, the reason we're not because there was a discussion earlier about stormwater and open bottom culverts. One of the reasons we are proposing not to completely replace this culvert, as Matt mentioned, it's only access into the plant currently and the reservoir, but we have 3 main lines that cross that culvert. The raw water line going to the water plant, the water line coming back from the plant, and then the waste line coming back from the plant. So it would be very expensive and difficult to build back what's there if we had to replace it. So we solicited pricing. We felt like the spin cast was the best fit for this application. While you see there's some rusting along the edge of the pipe. I know it's hard to see in the photo. It's rusting right along the edge of the water line. But generally speaking, the pipe's in good condition. It's not buckling in the top, even though there's a little bit of joint separation that you can sort of see in the photo. A joint separation like that's enough to wash mud out, but it's not too much that we can't fix it. So the spin casting will solidify that pipe and carry it into the future. It also gives a little bit smaller area, but it's a smoother flow pattern, so it can still carry more water. So we solicited several prices. The best price that we received was from J.W. Hampton with a sub that they have that really does the pipe work. They'll just do the surface repairs, repairing the road above. And The price for that construction is $92,000. We're still recommending that we have some level of contingency, probably $10,000. I don't think we'll need that, but if there's a little bit more material that they need to make the repairs, there'll be an extra cost to that. But it does include all the work to divert the stream from one culvert to the next. We've asked the agencies, and we can go past the trout moratorium of October 15th to make these repairs. We've already got that clearance, and we're planning on, if everything goes well tonight and schedules work, to start that work next week, hopefully, so that we can get it done before the winter. That's our game plan right now, instead of waiting until next spring when we get past April 15th.
How many more culverts look like this? Do we know? Is this what happened at Valley View?
Valley View's a different situation.
Yeah, those are 15-inch culverts that, these are 7-foot culverts that are carrying the stream out of Chicola down that way. So it's kind of a
Busy culvert?
Yeah, it's.
On Valley View, part of the problem that happened there was the slope failed because water was running across the slope. Here, I'll go back. Here, if you see, the settling is basically going straight down into the culvert. So we didn't lose the slope. They protected it enough to make sure the slope didn't wash away. This hasn't been a catastrophic failure. But just to think about the painful difficulties of these, you remember how long they worked in front of Chitola.
Yeah.
These culverts are just downstream from there, same stream. So, we don't want to get into that type of repair.
So this isn't something you're going to look at all over town?
When we did the bond project, we looked at what we knew about. The town doesn't have a lot of large culverts across the town because there's not a lot of large streams. So we don't expect this problem to happen. There will be circumstances that bring themselves up, but I don't see this being a widespread thing.
And if I may, stormwater is already on the agenda for the January retreat, so quality, quantity, and a number of other things as well. So we're planning on presenting a fairly in-depth overview of stormwater with concerns that we've had for the last number of years. That is already on the agenda.
Thoughts?
I think the spin cast is a great solution. Just out of curiosity, do you have any idea how that extends the life of that culvert?
There's not documentation on that, but it improves. We have the structural integrity of the pipe, but that increases the structural integrity of the pipe. So it would be difficult to say that extends the life 20 years, 30 years, anything like that.
That being said, do they offer any guarantee or warranty time on their workmanship?
I don't remember off the top of my head.
I feel like there was a warranty. I can't remember.
Okay. But they do offer.
But they do offer, I think it was a 1 year.
I think it's 1 year,
warranty.
which would be typical, just a typical construction, 1 year warranty.
Okay.
Seems like it have to be.
Yeah. What do you think, guys? Make a motion?
We do it.
Second.
We have a first, we have a second. Any further discussion?
Sort of
Albert?
no-brainer.
David?
Yes.
Sue?
Yes.
Doug? Yes. Okay, good.
I don't think we got a choice.
And once again, if I might add, the budget amendment was included in the packet, so you approved that amendment as well as a part of the approval.
Yes, sir.
All right, moving right along. Let's see, PRVs and ARPs.
Sure.
Thanks, man. Thanks for sticking out.
So if y'all remember in January at the retreat, we talked about PRVs and looking at getting those replaced and installing new vaults with everything. Worked with McGill and created a priority listing for those PRVs. I think there's 20 some in town. The number one PRV we wanted to look at replacing was the one at the intersection of Green Street and 221, right across from Wallingford. So that line feeds off of the 10-inch line, across 221 down Wallingford, and then kind of feeds back into Main Street. Obviously not the only feed for Main Street, since we're getting ready to replace the Main Street line, but that line being tied off the 10-inch controls the pressure from Main Street, and Sunset area seems to be more than any of the others. I know in the past we've had issues with that PRV's gotten stuck wide open and jack pressure's up, and we've had multiple leaks on Sunset and Main Street at the same time. So it is a direct effect on Main Street and the pressures. Like I said, that was our top priority to fix, and then with the Bass Lake sidewalk, we have the opportunity to get that PRV out of the road and behind the sidewalk where it's not in the travel lane. We've had issues in the past with that manhole lid coming off. I know a couple years ago, a van hit it, the manhole lid came off, and it pretty much took the rear end out from behind the van. So good opportunity to get it out of the road and get it, behind the sidewalk where we can actually work on it. Again, Doug's looked at that. We've had contractors out there to take a look at it, and I'll let Doug kind of explain where we're at with that.
We've gotten all of the permits that we need. We've worked with DOT, really in concert with Sidewalk Project, because we talked with the DOT rep. We were meeting out on the Sidewalk Project one day looking at some other issues. And I told him, I said, we're going to have to put a PRV in here. I need your help getting it approved. So that kind of expedited approval. So we've gotten everything in place. And we took 2 bids. The lowest bid was from Iron Mountain Construction Company for $136,385. And that is going to take care of putting in the new PRV and tying back in Green Street and tying in Wallingford. We have to bore under 221 to connect to Wallingford because the line comes across 221, then goes down the bank and out Wallingford.
All I can say is, if somebody who's worked inside of vaults all over campus, I would love to see a lot of these vaults get improved over here that we're sending people down inside of right now. So this is a much-needed project, one of a much-needed project.
Well, not only that, but if you look, the existing vault is here, right in the middle of the travel lane. So, and it's not a vault, it's a manhole.
It's a hole.
It's very tight.
And only Sterling about it can get down in it.
It's not pleasant.
And the term manhole is a name. That's not because a man fits in it necessarily. But this will be a vault that Matt and the staff can get in and work on, and it's going to be out on the side. And just as a point of reference, this area behind the sidewalk that's now all asphalt will be grass when that project's done.
Thoughts? Motion?
I know we do it.
Kudos to you guys for recognizing and coordinating this with the sidewalk. It's a great opportunity.
Yeah, and this was the one that, when we had a fire, that PRV failed. Is that what happened with that?
I'm trying to remember what happened. I feel like that was something to do with the fire hydrant there.
There was no water in it.
Yeah. It was also cold.
Yeah, I just remember I was out of town when that happened.
Aren't you lucky?
As I said, it's convenient for him to do that. One thing I was going to add that we did not know about, obviously in January, we put together, or McGill helped us put together a list of 1 through 24, I think, of our 24 PRVs, this being the most crucial of all, the most expensive of all as well, considerably. For instance, a price of the one, I think, over at Posamalo was under $20,000. So this is obviously a very expensive one and by far the number one. And at the time that we discussed this in January, the ARPA money that has now been awarded, COVID money essentially, was unknown. And so if you recall, I think I sent some information to you this summer that the town of Blowing Rock will receive a little bit more than $400,000 in, I call it COVID money, but ARPA money. that money can be used for COVID expenses. It also can be used for water and sewer infrastructure expenses. And so as we kind of looked at our top 5, we believed the ARPA money would cover those top 5. So we're starting with number 1 here, and the budget amendment that you have in your packet is utilizing the first payment of the ARPA money that we've already received, a little bit more than $200,000. So obviously not utilizing all of it, but starting the process with number 1 and starting the thought process of working our way down from 1 down with utilizing the ARPA money.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion, council? Albert? David?
Yes.
Sue?
Aye.
And Doug?
All right.
You got it. All right, moving right along. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to say that those that are here, please vote on November 2nd. And those listening in, November 2nd is Election Day. Also, I want to thank those that put together the petition for 321 Valley Boulevard. I think they've got, everybody loves Blowing Rock, and everything we can do to make it better and safer is very important to all of us. I'd like to welcome Brian Johnson. Is it Brian Johnson, correct? To
He's here somewhere.
Zoning and Planning, wherever he's hiding. Welcome on board. He doesn't look like Kevin. Okay. But welcome on board, Brian, and anything that I can do, the council can do, we're at your beck and call, but we will defer to Shane Fox. Albert, any thoughts?
Well, I've said this before, but I could say it every meeting. It would be hard for our town to survive all of its travails without McGill and Doug. So thank you, Doug, because I've been here when we did all this stuff by ear. And we did some things we shouldn't have done and paid good money for it. We don't do that anymore. So thanks once again to McGill.
Thanks, McGill. David?
As we mentioned before, with the Part F, I'm really proud of the advisory committee and the work they're doing, and really proud of where our ranking was with our Part F application, and still have my fingers crossed. But I think the group came together in a short amount of time and did a fantastic job, and the High Country Council of Governments, everybody that was involved in that. I know Melissa was here, Pete is here this evening. I want to thank everybody that's on that, and we're meeting tomorrow, and we're moving on.
Very good. Great job, guys.
Thank you.
Ms. Sweetie?
I think we're going to get the money. I believe that.
We have that in the minutes.
You personally guarantee it?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Doug?
A couple things. One, 2 weeks left of the shuttle, and I hope regardless of whether I'm here or not over the winter, that will be one of the next council's top things to talk about also during the retreat.
Okay.
I'm not going to take anything away from Shane. I think you're going to mention the 2 officers and Amanda in your comments. So I'll just hold off on mentioning that and let you do that. So.
Okay. Mr. Mosley?
Not at this time.
Okay.
Executive session.
Okay.
Certainly, I have a few updates here. Start with a couple projects we talked about tonight. Bass Lake sidewalk is getting ever so close to being finished. So we're hopeful in the next few weeks, I believe, that we should see that project hopefully come to a close. So they're working feverishly out there to finish up, but we should have a sidewalk open before winter. Did meet today with the Greens Construction, who was our bid award winner for the crosswalks. We had a pre-construction meeting today. The only real holdup there to getting construction started, like with everything, is getting the supplies here. So the signals themselves have about a 10-week, 10 to 12-weekish turnaround time, and so we met with them today That puts us into the winter. Work can begin in the winter, so we did decide that some of the demo work and conduit and et cetera can happen during the winter months, which would allow for, as soon as the weather breaks, for the concrete to go down the flat work, which is not a tremendous amount of flat work. And so that work will be completed over the winter and early spring is our timeline that we discussed today for the crosswalks. So by the time folks come back in warmer weather, we'll have 3 new crosswalks up. 4 new crosswalks, I should say, 2 at Sunset, and 1 at 221, and the other down at Chestnut. Sunset Drive landscaping finished up on the Sunset side, on both sides of Sunset, just a few weeks ago. So I'm sure you've all had a chance to go through and see the beautiful landscaping, amount of rock, et cetera. Over 400 tons of rock were put into that, and over 500 plants between the 2 sides were part of that project. The firehouse should begin just any day now with the similar look of boulders, plantings, et cetera, with the flagpole being the centerpiece of that. And I also mentioned to you all during one of the updates, due to the fact we were able to save substantially on the original budget, we were able to move forward with the replacement of the Legion steps as well as part of that project. So the stairs going down Legion Hill will be able to be replaced in the current location, which they're in right now. I had a chance to participate virtually with the ICMA annual conference this past week. So that was held in Portland, or my office or my home for me, and that was a fantastic opportunity to hear kind of how things have changed in the last couple years. The last time we all got together, and this again is a worldwide administrative group, was pre-COVID essentially. So it was interesting to hear how COVID has changed the world, literally the world as we know it in so many different ways. And most of the classes were COVID related somehow, some way, and how it's made us all look at things a little bit differently. Speaking of COVID, give an update since our last meeting on the 14th. At that time, we had 89 active cases. We have 71 now, 66 in quarantine on the 14th of September.
And that's in the county?
In the county, sorry. I apologize for the county. 73 now versus the 66 back then. So quarantine numbers are a few more, active numbers are a few less. Weekly testing began now 3 weeks ago. We're in the 4th week of that, the 2nd week of the mandatory testing, and we've had 100% compliance at this point from the employees that are not vaccinated, so no issues there, which I'm happy to report. Voting, you did mention on 11/2 is here at Town Hall in this room, so just for all those that may be aware of that, that is a Tuesday, so that fits within our...
Just one day?
Just one day.
No early voting here.
Early voting is at the courthouse and the student union, starting the 14th, which is 2 days, Thursday, from that. And then I do want to mention, so every now and then we receive, obviously, some uplifting emails, and I'm not sure if Chief Miller is still here. Kevin, is Chief still here? Yeah. He may be better suited to respond to this. We had an unfortunate situation.
Yes, sir.
Chief, do you mind giving just a brief update on the email you received with Lance and Caleb?
I think it was a golf cart incident. Somebody was trying to haul their trash can to the curb, and the golf cart turned over, and they responded, and I believe there was a little injury involved with that, but somebody sent us a nice email thanking them for the quick response and how helpful they were to riding the golf cart and helping get it home and all that. So, and I think they gave a ride to one of the parties to the hospital and brought him back home. It's not uncommon that we get these types of letters and emails, and we're very appreciative.
Chief, it's good, it's not uncommon. That says you're doing a good job.
Thank you.
And that's my update. Any questions? I'll be glad to answer.
I want to mention Amanda also.
Amanda, yes. So Tracy is not here, but Amanda, 2 weeks ago, I guess now, or was it last week, won a national award for her position at the TDA. It was in the Tadler, I believe, and the chamber put out something, and I mistakenly don't have the name here of the organization, but it's a national organization that essentially puts her up there above Tracy, which we all know she already is.
Does she get a Cadillac now?
She does get the Cadillac, so yeah, Tracy received the golf cart.
Moving Tracy on out.
But be happy to answer any questions, update any projects.
One question.
Certainly, sir.
I need clarification. I just need to ask you. The crosswalk at Rumpel and St. Mary.
Yes, sir.
is it going to modify or eliminate those parking places that you and I have talked about on the south and the north side of the east side?
So as we discussed during the approval process for those crosswalks, it's eliminating the 2 parking spaces on the north and south side of the Chestnut, east side of Main Street. That is correct.
Yeah, well, that's going to be a great help.
And again, that's not a signalized crosswalk. The reason for that simply is the fact there's not a signal there to signalize it. So it's simply going to, we have a safety island on the west side coming out from Rumpel that will go across, so it'll shorten the length of space there. It'll be marked, we'll have signage, et cetera, type of thing. There's not one there currently. We had discussed maybe a flashing sign. The difficulty there is you're on the sidewalk both sides, so we'll just have additional signage coming to north and south within that. So yes, the parking spaces will be eliminated as part of that project. The two projects, or the 2 other intersections at 221 and Sunset. Sunset will be obviously the major makeover with an addition of a second crosswalk that doesn't exist right now on the south side versus the one that's on the north side. So we'll have 2 signalized crosswalks there. And remember, the signals are coming down, so the traffic signals will become pedestal signals versus overhead signals as well. And then 221 is just a signalized crosswalk. Traffic signals stay up.
Okay.
Good, guys?
Maybe then we will do it.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go into closed session. Thank you for coming this evening.
This may make a motion to get
Albert?
I'll make a motion.